Well, the East Riding Council said it's considering its legal position after a bid to stop asylum seekers being housed in a hotel failed. A High Court judge ruled that the East Riding Council had not shown there was an urgent legal case to prevent the Home Office contractors from using the Humber View Hotel near North Ferriby. The local authority argued it was being converted to a hostel, which was in breach of local planning controls. Well, BBC Radio Humberside's Kim Harrison has been speaking to some people in nearby Hessel to see if they've got concerns about this decision.
It shouldn't happen because it's Hessel. It is. We have enough problems as it is. We don't need any more. We don't.
And what's the problems you're worried about?
Crime, mainly, and just an influx of people.
I'll make it short and sweet. I pretty much agree with what he's just said, that I think there'll be an influx of people wandering around, and the people of Ferriby, North Ferriby and Hessel, I don't think they want to see that. With them cancelling the weddings and the functions that they have at that hotel, the majority or a lot of those people normally come into Hessel, wander into Ferriby, spend money there, and they come and spend money in Hessel at the boutiques and the hairdressers and things like that. And I don't think that's going to happen. So I think it's going to reflect on the small businesses, especially in the Hessel area, and they're not going to be taking as much money from these guests.
I think it's perfectly fine. These people need somewhere to sleep and somewhere to live, so I don't see a problem.
Do you think it'll have an impact on the community?
I don't know. That's difficult to say. I wouldn't have thought so. No, it's well separated from houses where people live. I would have thought it was fine.
Well, some views in Hessel there, and David Davis, listening to that, the MP for Haltemprice and Howden, North Ferriby, sits in that constituency. Good evening.
Good evening.
I know you've spoken out before, and obviously I think you were supportive of the East Riding's bid to try and stop this happening. What do you make of the ruling?
Well, it's an odd ruling, really. I mean, if you or I said, OK, look, my son needs a house, so I'm going to break the planning laws, we get thrown out of court. But what, in effect, the judge said was, well, if you don't come here, they'll go somewhere else, so hard luck. I mean, I'm over-summarising, but that's broadly what he says. So I am actually hoping that the council appeals it. Now, they've got to make an intelligent judgment as to whether they've got a chance of success. They can't spend ratepayers' money unless they've got a chance of success. But I hope they're going to appeal it, and I hope it'll get overturned. I mean, it's obviously a very local version of a massive national problem now, and the only real solution to this is to stop this trade in the Channel. But for the people of Ferriby and Hessel, I think this is unfair. We had a similar issue with Thwaite Hall, the student accommodation, when the Home Office took that over, and I said to them then, look, the area you're looking at is probably more appropriate if you put families in. Okay, all of us have to take our share of the burden, but put families there, and that'll be workable. Instead, they put single men there. Within a week or so, 30 of the first 100 put in there just disappeared, just vanished. All Albanians, all driven away, the locals say, in a fleet of cars. So, this is not a controlled exercise. The government is not controlling it. And I objected to the way they handled Thwaite Hall, and they came back and said, well, we don't control them. We don't have any laws to control them. So what they're creating is an uncontrolled circumstance. Now, I don't know how big the problem's going to be locally, but I just don't want any problem, so that's why I supported the council. That's where it comes from.
We'll talk about the wider picture in a moment that you mentioned, but in terms of the East Riding Council, if they do appeal this, do they then have to think of a different argument? Because this argument that they have used has failed, obviously, as we've seen in this High Court case.
Well, what they have to show is harm. That's the issue, and the harm that exists here. One of your people you spoke to was right. It's a moderately isolated hotel, but that gives a problem. I mean, there's no services and so on. And when you put these people there, there's a sort of duty of care on the government and the local government to provide a degree of support, medical support, and so on. And it will put pressure on already stretched services. So what they need to do is articulate that harm rather more carefully, I think. and make the point to the next judge that hears it, if they do appeal it, that look, people in Ferriby, people in Hessel, people in all surrounding villages are already post-COVID having difficulties with public services. It'll get worse if you do this because we haven't planned for it and we haven't got the money for it. That's the sort of argument I would put if I were them anyway.
So if it's not the Humber View Hotel near North Ferriby, what would be a proper location to house asylum seekers?
Well, I guess in the short term, you'd probably look to either holiday camps. Basically the small communities, if you like. So ex-army camps, whatever. It's up to the government to find what assets it can, but at minimum cost and distress. Commercial distress and so on to local communities. One of my arguments with the Home Office here is that they've just said, oh, look, here's another 100 rooms or here's another 50 rooms. And they've not thought through carefully the fact that when they put 100 single men into these things, 30, 40, 50 of them disappear, and suddenly you've got an unknown population going into the black economy. We know a lot of these people are smuggled by Albanian gangs, so there's money going to Albanian gangs' pockets and so on. At the end of the day, they're going to have to solve the problem in the Channel, but in the meanwhile, they must fix the issues with the minimum harm, the minimum difficulty for local people.
You mentioned the problems in the Channel, and this afternoon we hear that the UK will pay France £8 million more a year with this new deal. So that will mean more officers patrolling the French beaches. UK officers are also able to observe patrols within France. Is that the answer? Do you think that'll have an effect?
It's the beginning. I asked a question today in the House about the extent to which we are providing proper surveillance, for example, over the Channel these days. If you look at the way the southern coast of Europe, which has got an even bigger problem than we have, is patrolled, there's huge surveillance, radar, infrared, telephone detectors, you name it, to actually tell when people leave the beaches. And one of the points I was stressing is that we've got to be able to say to the French, you've got somebody leaving that beach, you've got a group leaving that beach, and so we've got to make sure we do our half of it. But it's a significant step forward. I think it shows a bit of a change of French attitude. And now we're after Mr. Macron's election and so on. I think the politics in France has changed a bit, and I don't mind the 8 million. That's small beer when it comes to the cost of this problem in the longer run. And if we can stop the trade, and also, of course, at the same time, frankly, massively reduce the risk to the individuals, and particularly families concerned, that would be a good thing. But the other thing we have to do, and bear in mind I'm one of the strongest exponents of defending people's rights and asylum rights and so on, well, the other thing we have to do is to recognise that people coming from some countries, Albania is the most obvious, but it's not the only one, have got no asylum claim. Albania is a safe country. It has less references to the European Court than we do or France do. So they have absolutely no reference. That's why countries like Sweden and Germany simply say to them, if you're from Albania, go home, and send them back. And that's what we have to start doing, I'm afraid. We have to be a little tough-minded about this to be kind in the long run.
Thank you for your time this afternoon, David Davis, the MP for Haltemprice and Howden. The Humber View Hotel sits in Mr Davis's constituency. The East Riding Council have told us today we're disappointed that the court has declined to grant the interim injunction against the Town and Country Planning Act. We will now consider our legal position in respect of a final injunction hearing and any other methods of planning enforcement available to us in due course. The Council takes all breaches of planning law seriously and will continue to do so.